Ah, hello there. Welcome to the first chapter of the wonderfully weird tale known as the Green Children. It is an early medieval story, so brace yourself for some truly atrocious translations. But that's half the fun, isn't it? And let me tell you, this story is bizarre to say the very least. So let's just dive right in. Once upon a time, in a village in England called Woolpit, which is near the modern-day city of Bury St. Edmunds, there was a strange tremor which shook the foundations of many a house and made the villagers think that their end was nigh. They said that a great chasm had opened up beneath the earth, swallowing everything in its path. And when they looked into this yawning abyss, they saw nothing but darkness. And so the people of the village began to say that a great part of the land was hollow, and that underneath the earth there was hidden a deep pit which led to hell itself. And this went on for several days. But then, after a while, the noises ceased and everyone carried on with their lives. But one day, not long after this unsettling event, two children were playing near the wolf pits, which were deep ditches dug around the village in order to keep the wolves out. You know what? Let's go ahead and establish now that this is probably where the term wolf whizzing came from. You heard me. It's common knowledge. Anyway, these two children, a brother and sister, were playing by the wolf pits when they heard a strange sound, like the beating of a drum. So they stopped playing and listened intently. And they heard once again those strange murmurs that the adults had heard at the time of the tremors. They described them as the sound of gnashing teeth and horrible voices. The children were scared and ran away from the awful noise until they came across a shepherd named Oswin tending to his flock. Now, Oswin was no stranger to the strange and unusual. After all, he was tending sheep and spending all day every day in the middle of nowhere. So he wasn't exactly well versed in social graces or the niceties. In fact, he was a little bit simple, but he was a good man and he took care of his sheep. And so when the children told him what they had heard, he didn't think too much of it. He just shrugged and said that they were probably just hearing things. But they insisted that he come and hear for himself, so he eventually agreed. And sure enough, when they got back to the wolf pits, they could hear those strange sounds once more. And so Osborne, thinking that he was a brave and God-fearing man, decided to climb down into the wolf pit and see what he could find. As he descended into the darkness, he heard a voice that seemed to come from all around him saying, turn back, you cannot go any further." But Osborne thought, why should I turn back? Who's there? He continued on until he reached the bottom of the ditch, where he found a small opening. He looked inside, but it was so dark that he could see nothing. And so he reached inside to try and feel round in the darkness. And then suddenly he felt something slimy and wet, and he pulled his hand back quickly. When he shone his lantern inside the hole, he could see that it was full of water. Then he heard a voice coming from inside saying, "Give me a light," and Osborne replied, "I would, but I have nothing to give you." And then the voice persisted and said, "I will give you my light for your light." And Osborne thought, what does that mean? Is it some kind of riddle? But he agreed anyway. And so he leaned his lantern into the hole and dropped it inside. Then he climbed out of the ditch and ran as fast as he could away from the wolf pits. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was in this situation, I would probably want to get as far away from this creepy talking hole as possible. But no, our dear Osborne decided to go back to the village and fetch some rope so he could descend into the hole and retrieve his lantern. When he told the villagers what had happened, they thought that he was mad, but they also thought that it was a little bit exciting. And so they helped him make a rope ladder and lowered him down into the hole. And when he reached the bottom, He found that the water had risen and was almost touching the top of the opening. And then he heard a voice saying, "You should not have come back here, but since you are here, give me your cloak." And Oswin thought, "My cloak? Why does it want my cloak? I bet it's trying to steal my clothes." But he agreed anyway. And so he took off his cloak and lowered it into the hole. Then he waited, but the voice never asked for his boots or his spurs or any of his other gear. And after a few minutes, he started to climb back up the rope ladder. And when he reached the top, he ran as fast as he could to tell the villagers that they needed to come and take a look at this hole. And when they arrived, they saw that the water had receded and there was a large opening where before there had been none. And when they looked inside, they could see that it was a tunnel leading down into the earth. And the villagers were curious, but they were also a little afraid, because what if this tunnel led to hell? What if demons were clambering out of it to drag them down to their doom? And so Oswin volunteered to go down the tunnel and see where it led. And the villagers agreed. They helped him make another ladder and lowered him down into the darkness. Now, apparently, this tunnel was extremely long, and it was very narrow, so Oswin had to squeeze his fat little body into a very tight space. And he reached a point where he couldn't go any further, so he turned round and started to climb back up. But then he heard a voice saying, "You may go forward a little more, but you must bring no light with you." And Oswin thought, "What light? I have no light." But the voice persisted, and so he agreed. And he went a little further into the tunnel until he came to a small chamber. And in the middle of the chamber was a single stone, and it was glowing with a soft light. And when he touched the stone, he was enveloped in a blinding flash of light, and then he passed out. When Oswin regained consciousness, he found himself in a beautiful meadow surrounded by trees and flowers. And in the distance, he could see a castle. And then he heard a voice saying, "Welcome to our land. You are most welcome here." And Oswin thought, "Is this heaven? Have I died?" But the voice persisted and said, "We have been expecting you. Come with us." And so Oswin followed the voice until he came to a group of people who were unlike any he had ever seen before. They were tall and thin, with long necks and pointed ears. And when they saw him, they said, "So you are the man who brought us the light. We have been in darkness for so long, and you have brought us light. We will be ever in your debt." And they invited him to come and live in their land. And they showed him all the wonders they had to offer. There was plenty of food and drink and beautiful women and amazing music. And Oswin thought, "This is heaven. Why wouldn't I want to stay here?" Well, that's the end of part 1. Join me next time for a part 2, where we discover the true nature of this magical land and the people who inhabit it. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and consider subscribing. And if you want to hear more about the history of England, stay tuned. Until then, goodbye. The Green Children. Chapter 2, The Arrival. Now, when day had returned to the village of Egdon and the sun shone once more through the trees that surrounded the lonely farmhouse where Giles and Elfrida lived, they were stirring. For deep within the recesses of the pit, two strange sounds had been heard during the night. At first, it was just one sound, like the moans of some wild animal. Then it became two, and by the third hour after midnight, they were distinguishable as the voices of two children. And though their words were strange and no one could understand what they said, it was clear from their speech and manner that they were human. When Elfrida heard this, she turned to her husband and said, "Giles, do you hear those voices? We must go see who is out there." But Giles merely rolled over and pulled the covers over his head, saying, "'Tis but some traveller's children, lost and afraid." Let them come closer to the house, and then we shall see." So Elfrida dressed herself in haste and went out into the night with a lantern held high above her head. She walked right up to the edge of the pit and called down, "Who is down there? Come out, whoever you are, and say what you would." Then the two voices ceased, but soon one of them began to call out in a voice like the tinkling of a small bell, "Jine, here. Jine, come away." And another voice, deeper and gruffer, answered, "Hold your hand, child. They can do us no harm." And then, "Who are you? Who are you?" They cried together. "We are travelers," said Elfrida, "and mean you no harm. Come up out of the pit and tell me how you came to be down there." And soon enough, taking Elfrida's words for a promise, the two travelers climbed up out of the pit. When they reached the top, Elfrida could see that they were indeed children, a boy and a girl, each about the age of 8 or 9. Their skin was the color of emeralds, their hair was like flax, and their eyes shone like gold coins in the firelight. And though their clothes were strange, even beautiful, they were torn and covered in mud from head to toe. Elfrida was startled by their appearance, yet her fear turned quickly to pity. Kneeling down before them, she said kindly, "How did you come to be in the pits? Are your parents near?" But the children looked at her as if she had been a monster and spoke in such strange words that Elfrida understood not a syllable. Then they turned and ran across the field toward the road, calling out to each other in their strange tongue, as if afraid Elfrida might change her mind and try to harm them. At the sight of this, Elfrida stood up and hurried back to the house, calling out to her husband, "Giles, you must come see these children." By the rood, they were green, and so Giles came out to see, and upon seeing the two green children, he fell to his knees and cried out, "By street, Michael, what fiends have come upon us?" Then, thinking fast, he beckoned with his finger for Elfrida to be silent and went out to the road where the children had vanished. He walked all the way to the edge of the village, and there saw their footprints in the soft mud, but no trace of where they had gone. And soon the villagers came running, all asking the same question. What manner of children were these that came out of the pits? And though Elfrida told them what she had seen, no one believed her, for it seemed impossible that any child could have such green skin, and no one could account for how they had come to be in the pits. And so the villagers dispersed, shaking their heads and muttering to themselves. But Elfrida could not stop thinking of the children and what had become of them. So she took a cloak and wrapped it round her shoulders, and went out to the road once more to search for them. She followed their footprints along the road until she came to a bend in the path. There, hidden among the trees, she found a small cottage. Smoke rose from its chimney and a light shone in its window. So she knocked, and when she did, she heard the sound of many voices speaking the same strange tongue as those of the children. And when Elfrida heard this, she was filled with a great fear, for she knew not what manner of people dwelt in this house. And so she called out, "Who is there within? Come open this door." But when she cried this, the voices within the house ceased, and there was a long silence. And then the door creaked open, and a woman stood there with a lantern held before her. Her face was hidden in the shadows, but she asked in a strange tongue, "What dost thou want?" And Elfrida answered, "I seek the children who came by here a while ago. Have you seen them?" But the woman shook her head and closed the door. Yet Elfrida pressed forward and reached out to push it open. And when the woman saw this, she cried out in a terrible voice, "Begone, vile witch, or I shall call the spirits of the air to bind thee." Hearing this, Elfrida drew back her hand and stepped aside. And then The woman opened the door wide and beckoned to Elfrida to enter. And though Elfrida was afraid, she went inside and left the door open behind her. And when she entered, she saw a hearth filled with burning coals, but no furniture or sign of life anywhere. And so she called out, "Are there no one else here? Where are the children?" But no answer came, only the crackling of the fire. And Elfrida was about to turn and leave when she saw something lying by the hearth, and she went over to see what it was. It was a cloak like those worn by the children, and upon it were strange markings and symbols. And when Elfrida touched it, she heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Touch not our garments, mortal, lest you become as we are forever." Startled by the voice, Elfrida started back, but before she could move, the figure stepped out from behind a chair and cried, "So, another curious model. What brings you to this place?" And when Elfrida turned, she saw a woman standing there. Her face was pale and drawn. Her eyes shone like golden coins in the firelight, and her fingers were long and tipped with claws. And when she spoke again, her voice was like the tinkling of a bell. "This is no place for you. You should not have come here, little mortal." Then Elfrida tried to speak, but her voice failed her, and all she could do was stare in wonder at the woman before her. She was beautiful, yet terrible, and her eyes seemed to hold ancient secrets that humans were not meant to see. And as the woman approached, Elfrida felt a strange pull, a desire to know more, to learn the secrets that lay hidden in her gaze. But then the woman stopped before her and said, "Do not be afraid, little mortal. I mean you no harm. Come with me." And as she spoke, she reached out a hand and touched Elfrida's forehead. In an instant, Elfrida felt a jolt of energy surge through her veins, and with a start, she realized that she understood the words of the woman. The woman smiled and said, "Welcome to our world, little mortal. I am Jine, and this is my brother, and you are the first human to ever find us." Elfrida looked at the brother and saw that he, too, had green skin and wore similar clothes to those of the children. But it was Jine's face that held her attention. In that brief moment when their eyes met, Elfrida had seen something that made her blood run cold, a flicker of something wild and untamed in their depths. A hint of a power that was both alluring and terrifying. And in that instant, Elfrida knew that she had stumbled upon something ancient and dangerous, a secret that should have remained hidden in the mists of time. And now, with the touch of Jine's hand still tingling on her forehead, Elfrida found herself caught in a web of magic and mystery, a world far removed from her own, where the rules of nature were bent and the very fabric of reality was at stake. As Jine led her deeper into the cottage, Elfrida couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay hidden in the shadows, what dangers lurked round every corner. The green children had revealed themselves to her, and now it was up to her to decide how to proceed, to choose between the safety of her own world and the allure of the unknown. And as the fire crackled merrily in the hearth and the shadows danced on the walls, Elfrida knew that her life would never be the same again. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel and leave a review. The author would like to thank all of his patrons for their generous support. Become a patron today and help bring more fantasy to life. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the series. This is the third episode of our short film series based on the strange but true events that are recorded in the pages of the Book of the Werewolf by historian and folklorist Elfrida Andresdotter. The first 2 episodes can be viewed on our channel or on our app, so make sure to check those out if you haven't already. You can also find behind-the-scenes videos and other exclusive content there too. Without further ado, let's jump into it. The Green Children, Chapter 3, The Hunger. The two children had now been living with Elfrida for over 3 weeks. They still refused to speak, but they did answer to their names. And though they were incredibly thin, they were otherwise healthy. They played outside every day, chased butterflies and picked flowers, but never ate them. They also refused all cooked food and most of the time even turned away from the smell of fresh bread baking in the oven. But there was one food that they would eat: raw beans. They would sit for hours shelling beans, then gobble them up without washing or cooking them. Sometimes they would ask for milk, which they would drink without spilling a drop. It seemed like they were missing a lot of nutrients from their diet, but they showed no signs of illness. However, the boy seemed to be getting weaker. He often sat alone, his head in his hands, while the girl ran about the farm with carefree energy. She seemed happy. He looked sad. Elfrida watched them from afar, unsure what to do. What could she feed them so they would get stronger? She tried fruit, vegetables, fish, meat, bread, cheese, butter, porridge, ale, berries, nuts, everything she could think of. She even brought in a goat for them to milk themselves, but the children only laughed at the animal and refused to touch it. When Elfrida offered them food, they would sometimes tell her that they weren't hungry or that they didn't like that food. Other times, they told her that they hadn't eaten since before they came to live with her, and they didn't know how to eat. But when she left the house with a basket of beans, they would follow her, then pick the beans apart with nimble fingers. One night, Elfrida woke from a dreamless sleep to the sound of the children screaming in the bedroom they shared. She rushed to them and found the girl sitting on the bed, her eyes wide and staring, while the boy lay on the floor kicking and thrashing. His face was red and contorted in pain. She felt for a pulse, then quickly began to cross herself. She called out for the priest, who arrived that same hour with a holy water sprinkler. The priest sprinkled the boy with holy water, read some prayers, and made the sign of the cross on his forehead. Then he told Elfrida to bring him some wine, and she did. The boy drank the wine and calmed down a bit, then told her to put some more beans in front of him. After he had eaten as many beans as he could, he went back to bed and fell asleep. Elfrida, deeply disturbed by the boy's fit, stayed awake with him that night. She wasn't sure what was wrong with him, but she knew she had to protect him. In the morning, the priest came again to see how the boy was doing. He said that the boy's fits were likely due to some evil spirit that had entered him. He blessed the room again and gave Elfrida some holy water to keep the spirit away. The boy did have another fit that night, but this one only lasted a few moments. He told Elfrida that he was very thirsty, then drank a whole jug of spring water without stopping. Afterwards, he lay back down, exhausted, and fell asleep. In the following weeks, the children continued to eat only beans and drink lots of water. They still played outside every day, though. They chased each other around the farmyard, climbed trees, and swam in the river. The boy, though, became thinner and weaker. He couldn't keep up with the girl anymore and spent most of his days sleeping. Even after eating his fill of beans, he would lie on the hay in the barn and stare up at the roof, a sad look on his face. Elfrida worried that he would die if he didn't start eating properly. She coaxed them both to eat other foods, but the only thing that went in their mouths was the beans. Meanwhile, the girl grew stronger and happier. She helped Elfrida with the housework, gathered flowers and herbs, and even started to talk. She spoke in a strange language that Elfrida couldn't understand, But she seemed comfortable speaking and soon began to sing as well. Every evening, after the sun dipped below the hills, she would sit on the porch and sing softly to herself. Her songs were haunting and beautiful, and though Elfrida didn't know what the words meant, she felt their sadness. The girl sang of a far-off land filled with darkness and cold, where the sun didn't shine and the earth didn't grow. She sang of people with grey skin who had no joy or laughter, who lived in caves and slept during the day. Then they came out at night to eat raw fish and scream at the moon. Elfrida listened to the girls' songs and wondered where they came from. She thought perhaps the children had come from faraway lands across the sea, where the people lived in darkness and only ate raw fish. Maybe that's why they had green hair and skin, and why they loved the beans so much. Beans and fish were very common foods in those far-off lands, she had heard, and maybe that's what the girl was singing about. As summer passed and autumn approached, the weather grew colder. One evening, as Elfrida sat by the fire, she noticed that the children had been playing in the mud all day and were soaked to the bone. She pulled them close to the fire to dry them off, and when she felt the girl's forehead, she realized that she had a fever. The girl shivered violently and whispered for Elfrida to get more beans. As Elfrida crushed the beans in the mortar, the girl drank some water, then threw up all over the floor. Elfrida cleaned the mess and tucked the girl in bed, then went to fetch the priest. The priest prayed over the girl, sprinkled her with holy water and gave her some wine. Then he told Elfrida to leave them alone until morning. When Elfrida returned in the morning, the girl was fine and full of energy, but the boy wasn't awake. He looked peaceful, but he didn't move when Elfrida shook him. The priest came that same day and told Elfrida that the boy had died because of his unhealthy diet. Elfrida cried for the boy, but she knew the priest was right. She wished she had done something else, anything else, but she just couldn't figure out what. For the next few days, Elfrida buried herself in work, trying to forget her sorrow. But at night, she couldn't sleep. Instead, she wrote down everything she knew about the children. She wrote about how they had come to her doorstep, about their games, about their food, about their songs, and about their strange habits. She wrote it all down in a little book, hiding it under the floorboards whenever anyone came to visit. She was afraid that people would think she was crazy for writing such nonsense. So she didn't show the book to anyone, not even her husband. But then one night, she woke up from a dreamless sleep to the sound of someone reading her book. Someone sat on the edge of her bed, reading aloud from the book that was hidden under the floorboards. She had written so much information about the children that someone had been able to use it to find her and ask her questions about them. She wanted to call out, but no sound came from her throat. She wanted to run and hide, but she couldn't move. The person on her bed kept reading, and the more they read, the more Elfrida remembered. She remembered that the children had asked her for more beans, that the girl had thrown up, that the boy hadn't woken up. She remembered everything. And then the person on her bed stopped reading and vanished. Elfrida was left alone in the darkness, the book lying open on her lap. In the morning, she got up and locked the book under the floorboards again. But something was different now. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had remembered who had come to her house all those years ago. She had known this story all along, deep down, but she had forgotten it until that night. Now she remembered it clearly, and she knew that she wasn't going mad. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a like and a comment telling us what you thought. We'd love to hear your feedback. Also, We've got plenty more content for you to watch on our channel and on our app. So don't forget to subscribe to both to be the first to know when new content drops. Until then, take care and see you next time. Now, it's been about 4 months since the green children showed up in our village. The girl child has stopped crying. In fact, she hasn't cried at all since the day she arrived. And it's not that she's happy. It's just that she doesn't cry anymore when she's upset. But she is upset. She still has nightmares. She still wakes up screaming. And though her brother comforts her, I can see how much he worries me. It's the little things. A sparrow can chirp too close to her while she is sitting outside and she screams and cowers down, clutching her brother's arm. Then she looks up at me with eyes full of terror and says, "Bird bad." Or she'll be sitting there and a leaf falls on her lap and she'll scream again and throw the leaf away from her like it has burned her skin. Or sometimes she just sits staring off into the trees and says, "Forest scary." But that's getting better. She's learning English quickly. She learns by watching us. Her vocabulary has gone from a handful of words to now nearly 100. Mostly nouns and adjectives, but she can put them together into phrases. Tree big, house small, bird fly. She even picked up on the word please and uses it a lot because she still doesn't understand what we want from her. We try to tell her, please be normal, but I don't think she knows what that means either. This afternoon, she was playing outside with Caleb and some other children. But she wasn't really playing. She was just standing in the middle of them, looking at them while they played. She didn't really say anything, but every once in a while she would point at what they were doing and say, "They play rope." And the other kids would look at her and keep playing. They haven't had the heart to tell her that she can join in with them yet. So for the most part, she watches us from the sidelines. When she comes inside at night, she goes straight to the corner of the room and sits down on her bedroll. Sometimes she will ask for food or for water, but mostly she just sits there. I tried telling her to come sleep in my bed, but she screamed and ran back to her room. She hasn't let us touch her. She doesn't even let us get close to her. But I did get her to talk today. While we were eating dinner, she was staring at her plate of stew and I asked her why she wasn't eating. And she looked up at me and said, "Food good." Then she went back to staring at her plate. So I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Don't know." Then, after a minute, she said, "Land far away cold." I thought she meant this place. So I asked her, "Is the land far away cold?" And she nodded her head and then shook it. "No cold." So I asked her to explain and she said, "Twilight land. Sun no rise. Always cold." That sounded nice. So I asked her to tell me more about it. But she just stared at her plate. So I got up and went over to her and knelt down next to her, and I put my hand on her shoulder and she flinched and knocked my hand away. And I knew that I had pushed too far, so I backed off. Then she said, "Green hair dot cold," and I understood that she meant this place. Here. This is the cold place. This is the land where the sun rises. I spent some time thinking about it. I mean, obviously, the sun does rise here. It's not hard to notice. It does take a few hours for it to get over the mountains, but it always does rise. And I can see why she would think that. We do have quite a few dark mornings during the winter. The days are short. The sun only shines for a few hours, and she must have come here at one of those times and thought that the sun wasn't coming back up. She probably hasn't seen it rise in 2 years. But that also made me wonder if she ever sees the sunset. Does she watch it get dark? Does she see the sun go down? I went back to my chair and asked her, "When sun go down, is it cold?" She looked up at me and thought about it for a second. "No cold, twilight." Then she started staring at her plate again. "Sunsleep," she whispered. I felt like I was making progress with her. At least I knew she wasn't just some sort of monster that hated sunlight. That would have been really scary. I asked her if she could show me this twilight land, but she just shook her head. "Can't show. No way." I am beginning to realize that she isn't going to tell us anything that she doesn't want to. And I don't blame her. I mean, I wouldn't trust us either. After dinner, the three of us sat by the fire and I brought up the map. I wanted to quiz Mary Claude to see if she knew anything else about the lands around here. Like, did she know what mountain range we were in? Did she know what river was nearby? Did she know any landmarks? But she didn't know anything. Whenever I asked her about something on the map, she would just shake her head. So I tried asking her about her own home. "Where is your house?" I asked her, and she pointed to the center of the map. There. Then I asked her, "What's near your house?" And she said, "No near." Greenhouse. Big tree. Okay. So she knows the layout of the map. She knows where north is, east is, south is, and west is. Maybe she really is just a lost child. Maybe she's just a kid who wandered away from home and couldn't find her way back. Maybe she fell through some sort of interdimensional rift and ended up here. Well, maybe her brother did. Maybe she followed him through and then she couldn't find him. But the question is, why didn't she wander into someone else's village? Why did she come here? This is the middle of nowhere. We don't even have a proper road. The only reason that she found us is because we had a campfire going that night. She was probably freezing and scared and desperate, and she smelled the fire and came running. And then she saw us and got scared and ran away. And then we chased her down and she screamed and froze and turned to stone. And then she woke up and cried. Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds right. That sounds like something that could happen. So I asked her, "Do you remember what happened? Do you remember how you got here?" She shook her head. "No remember." I could tell she was lying. She does remember. She's hiding something from us. But what? That's when Alara came into the room, and she overheard me talking. "What's wrong with her?" She asked. "Why won't she talk to me? Why won't she let me touch her? Why won't she come sleep in our bed? What did we do to her?" I sighed and explained my theory to Alara. That she wandered into our village from somewhere else. But Alara shook her head. "No, she's not from somewhere else. She's from here. She belongs here." "How do you know?" I asked her. "Because," she said, "she's 5. We argued back and forth about this for a while. She insisted that they were 5, but I insisted that they were lost. That they didn't belong in our world. But they were definitely lost here. Alara refused to believe that they were lost. She said that they belonged here. She said that they were from the Whispering Woods. Then we all heard Marigold scream from her room. It was horrible. It sounded like an animal had been killed. I immediately got up and ran to her room. Alara followed behind me, but Caleb stayed seated. He was staring at the floor. I threw open the door, and I found Marigold kneeling on the ground next to her bedroll. Her eyes were wide and terrified, and she was pointing at the wall behind me. "Bird," she whispered. "That bird." And I looked over my shoulder and I saw nothing. But then I heard a loud thump from above us. Something heavy had fallen onto the roof, and I suddenly remembered the nest of shrikes that I had seen building in the eaves earlier this summer. Shrikes. They mimic other birds' calls and then they swoop down and snatch them out of the air. And I told Alara. See, I told you that she was scared of birds. But Alara wasn't listening to me. She was staring at the wall. That's not a bird, she said. That's a harpy. That's a harp eagle. Then she turned to me and she said, these aren't fae. These are cursed. Cursed by a hag. Cursed to become harpies. Then I heard another thump. Something heavy had fallen onto the roof again. Then I heard Marigold scream again. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and a comment and subscribe. It was about a fortnight after the children's rival when the boy began to fall ill. It started with a cough, a hacking cough that shook his thin frame and rattled the bones in his face. Then he grew feverish, and it seemed to Elfrida that his eyes burned with a cold fire. She watched him waste away, becoming thinner and more hollow-eyed by the day, until he could no longer leave the hut without collapsing. And then finally, he stopped speaking altogether. This was a development Elfrida had been dreading. It wasn't so much the silence itself, but what it represented. For a whole week now, the girl had been singing songs from her homeland. Songs of love and loss, of journeys and of home. But the boy made no reply, even when she spoke to him directly, and he only answered with downcast eyes and shaking head. Every time Elfrida asked him a question, the answer was the same. I don't know. He would say, his voice raspy and weak, I'm sorry, I don't know. And then he would avert his gaze once more. Fear twisted Elfrida's heart because she knew that he did know. And she sensed that if she could only find a way to reach him, to pierce the wall round his heart, he would tell her everything. So she sat by his bedside every day, singing the songs of her people, hoping that something would spark in his eyes, some memory of who he once was. But it wasn't until the fever broke and he grew stronger again that she finally saw a change. The first sign was a restlessness. The boy would pace the hut floor, muttering to himself and wringing his hands. Sometimes he would collapse onto his knees, burying his face in them, and Elfrida would hold back tears as she stroked his hair and murmured soothing words into his ear. Then one day she found him outside the hut, sitting on the ground and drawing in the dirt. At first she couldn't make out what he was doing. He was too far away, and the markings were too small. But as she drew closer, she saw that he had made a map. He had drawn the coast, the sea, a harbor and several buildings. One of the buildings was a church with a spire pointing towards the sky. Another was a large manor house with many windows. And between the two stood a smaller house, which must have been where he and the girl had lived before they came here. Beside the drawing, he had written the word home in a spidery hand, and beside that, sea, with an arrow pointing to the waves. Elfrida didn't know exactly what it meant, but she knew it was important. Every day after that, the boy would leave the hut and draw another map, each one slightly different from the last, but all of them leading to the same place. Sometimes he drew ships on them, sometimes houses, and sometimes there were strange symbols that he seemed to recognize, for he would always pause and point to them when Elfrida joined him. He still wouldn't speak, not at first, but after a few moments, as if realizing what he had done, he would quickly cover the markings with stones and dirt and run back to the hut, hiding inside as if expecting someone to chase after him. Elfrida didn't know what to make of it all. On one hand, she was overjoyed that he was making progress, that he was remembering who he was and where he came from. But on the other hand, he was clearly afraid of something. afraid of what he was remembering or who he might be revealing it to. All she could do was sit by his side as he drew and wait for him to speak. And eventually, he did. One afternoon, as she watched him draw a symbol that looked like an upside-down heart, she asked, "What does this mean?" And he looked up, startled. Nothing," he whispered, quickly covering the drawing with dirt. "It means nothing. Please, just leave me alone." He turned away from her, and Elfrida felt her heart break. She knew he was hiding something from her, but she also knew that she couldn't force him to talk. So she spent the next few days trying to earn his trust, bringing him food and water and keeping him company. She told him stories of the journey south, of the markets and festivals and all the sights and sounds he had missed. And little by little, she saw the light return to his eyes. Still, whenever she asked him a question about his past, he would shut down, mumbling apologies and begging for her to give up. But his silence only made Elfrida more determined. She had come to this island seeking knowledge, and by Thursbeard, she would not rest until she got it. Finally, after a week of trying, she had an idea. She left the hut and went to the market. There she bought a small wooden tablet and a stylus. Then she returned home and waited for the boy to go to sleep. Then, under the cover of darkness, she crept up on him and, using the stylus, began writing on the tablet. "Who are you?" she asked. Startled, the boy bolted upright and stared at her. "What?" He stammered. You can write." "Yes," she replied, holding up the tablet. "And you must be very thirsty after being sick for so long. Why don't you write me your name?" Slowly, as if afraid of doing something wrong, the boy took the stylus and wrote a single letter on the tablet. Then he handed it back to Elfrida and shook his head, averting his eyes. Elfrida frowned, puzzled by his reaction. She had expected him to be overjoyed at being able to communicate, but instead he seemed ashamed. "What's your name?" she asked, and he hesitated. "Elias," he whispered. "My name is Elias." Taking a deep breath, Elfrida wrote, "Where are you from?" and waited. This time it took him a little longer to reply, but eventually he wrote, "A faraway land across the sea." Then he added, "I forget its name." Suddenly, Elfrida understood. It wasn't that the boy didn't remember anything. It was that he remembered everything. Every conversation, every lesson, every story, every name, every face. He remembered his entire life before, and it was all too painful for him to relive it now. But Elfrida needed to know. She needed to understand why the children had come to this island and what it meant for her. So she continued asking questions, and slowly, very slowly, the boy began to remember. "Why did you come here?" she asked. He hesitated, then wrote, "To escape." "Escape what?" "The war," he whispered, burying his face in his hands. "There is a war going on back home, and we had to get out while we could." "Did you have a king?" "We had a queen," he said, looking up. "A beautiful queen, the fairest in the land. But she is gone now." His voice cracked, and Elfrida reached out to touch his arm, but he flinched away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It's all right," he said, taking a deep breath. "It has been so long since anyone has spoken to me that I forget how to speak sometimes. It's just a habit." Elfrida nodded, understanding dawning on her. Of course he would react like this. He had been through something terrible, something that had taken his voice away. But she was determined to help him get it back. "Where did you live before you came here?" she asked, and the boy began to write, telling her about his life in a distant land, about his family and friends, about the places he had visited and the things he had seen. As he spoke, Elfrida felt her heart break for him. He had lost everything: his home, his family, his friends. And now he was forgetting who he was and why he had come to this island. But she would remind him. She promised herself, and she would make sure he got the help he needed. When the sun began to rise, the boy fell silent, covering his face with his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to tell you all that. I get carried away sometimes." Elfrida smiled, reaching out to stroke his hair. "It's all right," she said gently. "I want to hear your stories, and besides, you're not alone anymore. I'm here now." She leaned closer and whispered, "And together we will find your voice again." It's Sunday morning, and the villagers are all preparing for their trip to church. Marjorie, of course, is no exception. She got dressed in her finest clothes, put on her little bonnet, and joined her family as they walked out the door and into town. Today was an important day because it was the day that her baby sister would be baptized. And what better way to celebrate than by going to church? She didn't particularly like going to church. All of those people crammed together like sardines, the smell of stale waste and chamber pots, not to mention the lepers who occasionally showed up. But for her sister, she would endure it. When they arrived at the church, it was already crowded. Marjorie found herself getting separated from her family as they tried to find a seat near the front where the baptism was about to take place. It wasn't until after they were seated that she realized that she didn't actually see her sister being carried into the church. A priest began speaking, but Marjorie couldn't understand his Latin. So she sat there patiently waiting for the service to end. She kept scanning the crowd, desperately trying to spot her family. Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors burst open and two men rushed in. One of them was a monk. He ran up to the altar and whispered urgently into the priest's ear. Then he turned to the congregation and announced silence. Everyone fell silent, staring at him expectantly. "I bring tidings from God," he proclaimed, "and these tidings are grave, so heed my words carefully. For I say unto you, the Antichrist is here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. What did he mean? Who was the Antichrist? Was it someone in the congregation? Had he always been there, hidden among them, disguised? Fear started to take hold of Marjorie. If this mysterious Antichrist was in the crowd, then surely he must have noticed her. Perhaps he was watching her right now, deciding when would be the best time to strike. "Fear not," the monk continued, seeing the terror on the townspeople's faces. "For God has also sent us a Savior, a messenger to guide us away from evil and bring us back to the light. She has come to save us from eternal damnation." He gestured dramatically behind him for the doors to open again. In walked a young woman. Marjorie gasped when she saw who it was. It was the girl from the woods. The same girl that had offered her berries and spoken in tongues. What was she doing here? Why had they brought her to church? "Behold, here is God's messenger," the monk said, stepping aside to let her walk up to the altar. "She will lead us to salvation." But the girl didn't seem to know what to do. She looked round at all of the staring faces and started to cry. When Marjorie looked at her more closely, she noticed that she was covered in mud and leaves. Her hair was a mess and her clothes were torn. She looked scared and confused. Take her to the font. Brothers, the monk instructed. We must baptize her so that she can wash away the sins of the world. People came forward and grabbed a hold of the girl's arms, pulling her toward the font. Marjorie watched with wide eyes as the girl was lowered into the water. The priest started to chant in Latin, and the sound echoed throughout the church. Marjorie suddenly felt like she was part of some strange ritual, like something out of a scary storybook. The girl's head emerged from the water and she spit it out. She was shaking and still crying. I don't want this, she said, her voice muffled. I don't understand. The priest ignored her pleas and pushed her head back under the water. This time, she didn't come out. The people around Marjorie started to murmur. Something wasn't right. Was it really wise to baptize someone who didn't want to be baptized? Was this girl really a messenger of God or simply some poor, lost soul who stumbled into the woods and came out crazy? As if to answer their questions, the girl emerged from the font. Water streamed down her face and she looked dazed. She blinked slowly as if coming out of a dream. When she opened her mouth to speak, something shocking happened. Instead of speaking English or Latin, she started speaking in a language that Marjorie didn't recognize. She spoke rapidly and excitedly, moving her hands in strange ways. Marjorie leaned over to her father and asked, "What is she saying?" Her father shook his head, just as confused as she was. Just then, the girl stopped speaking and collapsed to her knees. People gasped and scrambled away from her, afraid that she might be contagious. Marjorie, though, wasn't afraid. She was curious. She wanted to help the girl, but she didn't know how. The monk, Brother Oldhelm, knelt beside the girl and gently touched her shoulder. "Don't be afraid, child," he said softly. "You are safe now. God has brought you here for a purpose." He helped her to stand up and led her over to a chair. "Rest here for a moment," he said. "You are exhausted from your journey." Marjorie watched as the monk poured a cup of water from a nearby jug and handed it to the girl. As she drank, she looked up at Brother Oldhelm and smiled. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I am thirsty." The monk smiled back. "You are welcome," he said. "Tell me, child, where are you from? How did you get here?" The girl thought for a moment. I don't know," she replied. "I woke up in the forest and I couldn't remember who I was or where I lived. I walked until I found you." Brother Oldhelm nodded understandingly. "Ah, so you are lost and confused," he said. "Do not worry, child. God has sent me to guide you." He placed a hand on her shoulder and closed his eyes in prayer. "Open your eyes, child," he said, "and tell me what you see." Marjorie leaned closer to hear the girl's reply. "I see light," she said softly. "A bright, beautiful light all round me." Brother Oldhelm's eyes widened in surprise. "Then you are the messenger," he exclaimed. "The one who has come to save us from eternal damnation." He rose to his feet and turned to face the congregation. "Brothers and sisters," he said, "I bring you good tidings. For I say unto you, the messenger is here." He turned back to the girl and knelt beside her. "Child, God has great plans for you," he said. "You are to be our savior, the one who will lead us to salvation." The girl looked at him, confused. "I don't understand," she said. "I don't want to be your savior. I just want to go home." Brother Oldhelm shook his head sadly. "You cannot go home, child. You are here for a greater purpose." He stood up and addressed the congregation once more. "We must prepare for the coming of the Antichrist," he said. "And we must do so quickly, for he is here among us, watching, waiting for us to grow complacent. But fear not, for the messenger is here, too, and she will guide us through the darkness." He turned back to the girl and offered her his hand. "Come, child," he said. "Let us go forth and spread the word of God." As they walked out of the church together, Marjorie couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. What was the Antichrist? And why was this poor, confused girl at the center of it all? Could she really save them from eternal damnation, or was she destined for something much worse? To be continued in Chapter 7. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a comment below to let me know what you think, and if you want to listen to the audio podcast version of this story, you can do so at our website. Thanks for watching. The Green Children, Chapter 7, The Dreaming Tree. The girl dreamt she was running through a forest, sunlight dappling the path ahead of her. Every so often, the trees would open up to reveal glimpses of another world. A world of towering buildings scraping the clouds and strange vehicles that flew on the ground, in the sky and even underwater. But there were no people anywhere, only strange, wonderful machines. And she could hear the whisper of wind chimes carried on the breeze. She woke up with a start. Had she been asleep? It felt like only a moment, yet when she sat up, she saw that Elfrida was gone. Where had she gone? The girl got out of bed and went to the window. She looked out at the dark forest. Surely Elfrida hadn't gone up there alone in the dark. Then she noticed the door was ajar, just slightly. So the girl put on her shoes and stepped out into the twilight. She walked through the forest, calling out for Elfrida, but there was no reply. The girl was starting to get scared now. She didn't know this forest well. If she lost her way, she might never find Elfrida. The girl ran into a clearing and gasped. There in front of her was a giant oak tree. Its branches seemed to be reaching out to her, gnarled hands begging to be noticed. And when she looked more closely at its trunk, she saw that it was covered in carvings. The same symbols the boy had drawn on the floor of the cave. Then the girl noticed something else. At the base of the tree, almost hidden by some rocks and dead leaves, was a large stone tablet. Was this what Elfrida had gone to see? The girl walked over and knelt down beside it. As she brushed away the last of the fallen leaves, she saw that the surface of the stone was covered in the same symbols as the tree. And then she noticed something else. One of the symbols was different. It looked like an arrow pointing downwards. Cautiously, the girl reached out and pushed aside some of the dirt. There was something buried beneath it. With shaking hands, she began to dig. Her fingers brushed against metal. She paused. Could this be one of those machines from her dream? She brushed away more dirt and uncovered a wooden box. It was ornately carved with the same symbols that covered the tree and the stone. The girl didn't know what to do. She looked round to see if anyone was watching, but there was no one in sight. No one would see her here in the middle of this forgotten forest. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a staff made of pure white crystal. As soon as she touched it, the girl felt a jolt of energy run through her body. Then she heard a voice in her head. "Don't be afraid, Dot, it's me. Are you the one who will help us?" The girl jumped back. Who said that? Was it the tree? Was the tree talking to her? It spoke again. "I am the dreaming tree. Do you seek the boy who looks like the stars? Follow the path of the whispering leaves and you shall find him." The girl knew what she had to do. The staff glowed brightly and the girl closed her eyes tight against the light. When she dared to open them again, She saw that the forest round her was gone. Instead, she was standing on a wide path bordered by trees. Their leaves rustled softly in the breeze, almost like they were whispering secrets to each other. The girl walked along the path. She didn't know how long she'd been walking for when suddenly the trees began to thin and she could see a village in the distance. It was unlike any village she'd ever seen before. The houses were built close together, almost on top of each other, and instead of having thatched roofs, they had flat roofs, some with solar panels, others with what looked like satellite dishes. And instead of smoke rising from their chimneys, wisps of steam curled into the air. As she got closer, the girl could see more details. People were moving round, going about their daily lives. Some were driving strange carts pulled by animals she'd never seen before. Others were carrying boxes or bundles of what looked like wires. And still others were flying weird boomerang-shaped devices that zipped round them like angry bees. But the most amazing thing about the village was the sky. It wasn't just the bright blue canvas sprinkled with fluffy white clouds. It was also full of strange objects that looked like shiny silver fish. They must have been the flying machine from her dreams. But how could she be dreaming and still be awake? The girl wanted to explore, to discover more about this amazing place. But then she remembered Elfrida. She'd come here to find the boy, not to sightsee. The girl stopped by a group of people and asked where she could find the boy who looked like the stars. They all looked at her, then burst into laughter. One of them wiped a tear from his eye and said, "You mean the star boy? Everyone's looking for him." The girl frowned. Why did everyone want to find him? Were they searching for answers, just like her? The man leaned closer and whispered, "They say he can grant wishes." The girl gasped. Could this be true? Would the star boy be able to help her return home? The man nodded slowly. Some say he already has. Look round you. This is no ordinary place. We are all here because of him. The girl looked round at the strange village, the people and the flying machines. Everything here was extraordinary, and it was all because of the boy. She had to find him. The girl continued on until she came to a large building in the center of the village. It was made of the same materials as the houses, but it was much bigger. And instead of windows, it had smooth, featureless panels. The girl hesitated. Should she go inside? What if the star boy was already there? What if someone else found him first? Just then, a woman approached. She was tall and slender with long flowing hair. Her eyes twinkled with amusement. Looking for someone? She asked with a smile. The girl blushed. How did this woman know? The woman chuckled and said, "I know all about you, child. You seek the boy who looks like the stars, do you not? He is here, but you cannot simply walk in and find him. Why not?" the girl asked. The woman's smile widened. "Because you are not worthy." She turned and walked toward the building. "But perhaps," she added over her shoulder, "you will be soon." The girl had no idea what the woman meant, but she followed her anyway. The woman walked right through one of the featureless panels and disappeared. The girl hesitated for a moment, then reached out and pushed the panel open. On the other side was a room unlike any she'd ever seen before. In the center was a huge tree. Its branches spread wide, forming a canopy overhead. The room was filled with people from all different races and ages. Some were sitting quietly, while others were talking in hushed voices. And at the very back of the room, the girl saw him. He was sitting on a low stone platform. Even from where she was, she could tell he was beautiful, with skin like polished marble and eyes that shone like distant stars. But the most striking thing about him was the staff he held in his hand. It was made of pure white crystal, just like the one the girl had found in the box. Could this be the staff of the dreaming tree? The girl took a hesitant step forward. All eyes turned to her. The star boy raised his head and smiled. The girl felt a jolt of recognition, as if she'd known him forever. In that moment, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Chapter 8, The Boy's Departure. Our story continues with the Green Children, the mysterious siblings who emerged from the woods, covered in moss and unable to speak the common tongue. For those who have just joined us, feel free to check out previous chapters to catch up on their tale. In the last chapter, we saw the children taken in by a kindly couple, Annika and Jorgen, who found them in the forest. The villagers were suspicious of the children, but over time, they began to warm up to them after seeing how gentle and kind-hearted the siblings were. Despite this progress, the village elder, Astrid, remained skeptical and continued to demand that the children be banished from the village, believing them to be nothing but trouble. Now, let us return to the Green Children and see how their tale continues. The morning after the village council meeting where the decision to banish the Green Children was made, the boy awoke first. As he stirred from his slumber, he felt weak and a terrible pain pulsed through his chest. Groaning, he opened his eyes to find the girl kneeling beside his bed, tears streaming down her face. Startled, the boy tried to speak, but only a raspy whisper escaped his lips. What? What happened? He croaked. You were ill, the girl replied, her voice thick with emotion. I heard the healer come and go last night. He said that you would likely die before the sun sets today. The boy's heart sank. He knew that the healer's words were true, for he felt the coldness of death seeping into his bones with every passing moment. With a heavy heart, he sat up in bed and looked round the room. It was a simple abode, sparsely furnished, yet it held a warmth and familiarity that had become a comfort to him since he came to know the kindness of its owners. He turned to the girl, her emerald eyes filled with concern, and reached out to touch her hand. Don't cry, little sister, he whispered, trying to offer her solace, although his own heart was filled with sadness. As the morning wore on, the pain in his chest grew more intense, making it difficult for him to breathe. The girl stayed by his side, holding his hand and whispering words of comfort until the moment the healer returned. Upon seeing the boy awake, the healer, an elderly man with a kind face and gentle eyes, approached the bed with a worried expression. How do you feel now? He asked softly. The boy managed a weak smile. Better. Thank you. Master Healer, he rasped, although his voice betrayed the immense pain he was enduring. But I know that I am dying. Is there nothing that can be done? The healer shook his head sadly. I'm afraid not. Your illness has taken a strong hold of you, and I fear there is no remedy. As the hours passed, the pain became unbearable, and the boy could only lie in bed and cry out. The girl never left his side, her small body trembling as she held onto her brother's hand, whispering prayers and incantations in a language he didn't understand, but which somehow brought him a strange sense of peace. When the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the room, the boy knew that his time was near. He looked at his sister, her face pale in the fading light, and whispered, Take care of yourself, little one. Live a good life and remember me. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I will, brother, she whispered. I promise. With a final surge of pain, the boy closed his eyes and his breathing slowed until it ceased altogether. The girl cried out, her voice filled with anguish, but the healer placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. It is all right. child," he said softly. "He is at peace now." As darkness fell, the villagers gathered outside the house, their faces grim. They had come to take the body of the boy away, for it was their custom to bury the dead before nightfall, Astrid. The village elder stood among them, her gaze fixed on the ground, despite her harsh words and skepticism towards the green children. She had seen the love and devotion they had for each other and felt a pang of sympathy for the girl who now faced the prospect of burying her brother alone. Jorgen and Annika came to the door, each holding a lantern that cast flickering shadows on their tearful faces. They led the villagers to the boy's body, which lay covered in a rough spun cloth on a wooden board. With reverence, they carried the body out of the house and laid it to rest in a shallow grave near the wolf pits on the outskirts of the village. The girl, still kneeling beside the grave, clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers to her chest. She watched silently as the villagers filled the hole and piled stones on top of it, creating a small mound over her brother's remains. When the moon replaced the sun in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the graveyard, the villagers prepared to leave. Astrid, who had remained silent throughout the burial, turned to the girl, her voice unusually soft. "Come with me," she said. The girl hesitated for a moment, her eyes still fixed on the grave, before she rose to her feet and followed the village elder away from the graveyard. As they walked, Astrid broke the silence. "You must leave this village," she said, her voice firm but kind. "You are different from us, and we cannot protect you from those who would do you harm." The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "But where would I go? And what would become of me?" "You will go to the Whispering Woods," Astrid replied, "to the place from which you came. There you will be safe, and I will send word to the others to watch over you." The girl shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "I don't want to go back there," she said, her voice trembling. "It's dangerous. Wild animals roam there, and there is no shelter or food." "I know," Astrid said, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "But you are stronger than you think, child. You have the strength of the forest in your blood, and I believe you will be all right." The girl sniffled, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. She knew that Astrid was right, and that she could not stay in the village any longer. With a heavy heart, she turned and walked away from the only home she had ever known, disappearing into the darkness of the Whispering Woods. And so the tale of the green children comes to an end for now, with the girl alone in the forest, the boy lying beneath the stones, and the villagers in their homes, each pondering the mystery of the children who came from the woods and touched their lives in such a profound way before returning to the wild, unknown from whence they came. We hope you enjoyed this chapter of the Green Children. If you did, please don't forget to show your support if you haven't already. We have more exciting content coming up, and we would love for you to be a part of our community. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to be reading the 9th chapter of The Green Children by Mary Norden. Father Anselm has now been looking after the girl for 3 weeks, and during that time, she has recovered fully from her illness and has shown no signs of ill health since he brought her back from the bog. He has taken her to confession, and he has heard her story of how she came to be in the bog. And now, he is just waiting for the bishop to come so that they can bring her up out of the bog and return her to her parents. But when the church authorities arrive, it seems that they have other plans for her. Let's jump right into the chapter. They had come for the child. She knew that well enough. Who else could those men be if not the men sent by the bishop? Father Anselm had told her that he would send for her when the time was right, when he has spoken with the bishop and made arrangements for her to be taken back to her parents. It must be now, thought Will. She watched them come down the path beside the bog, and she saw their faces solemn beneath their white hats. They were robed in black, and one of them carried a cross. 4 men there were, and one of them walked with difficulty, leaning on a stick. That was the man who had been ill in bed when William had first met him in the village, the one who had spoken so bitterly of the girl and her kind. Fear clutched at Will's heart. Had he come to harm her? Was that why the others had come? They stopped by the edge of the bog, and one of the men spoke, his voice ringing clear across the water. "William, daughter of the devil, come forth and submit yourself to the judgment of God." His words hit her like blows. "I am no daughter of the devil," she cried. "I am the daughter of King Oberon. Oberon, Satan, Beelzebub. What do names matter?" Another voice rang out, sharp and cruel. "You are a heretic. You are an abomination. Come forth, that we may deliver you unto the Lord." Will shrank back. Who were these men? What did they want with her? Why had they come to her home? She had done no harm to anyone. Will hid behind the big oak tree at the edge of the bog, clutching at its rough bark, afraid to move, afraid to speak. If she stayed hidden, perhaps they would go away. She peered out from behind the tree and saw them talking together in low voices, pointing at the bog. "She is in there, I tell you," one of them said. "I heard the old woman say so. She was seen going into the bog on All Hallows Eve, and she has not come out again. She will not come out," another said, "until we bring her out ourselves. We must find a way into that cursed place." Their voices seemed to come to her like the voices of giants, rumbling and shaking the ground. Then she heard the sound of axes ringing against the hard earth. A cold dread seeped into her bones. What were they doing? Were they hacking away at the roots of the oak tree, trying to pull it down into the bog? Anselm, meanwhile, had gone to the village to get help. But when he returned with the men from the village, it was too late. The tree had fallen and lay across the bog in front of him. And then he saw her, sitting on the bank with her chin resting on her knees. She had watched them fell the tree. The men stood for a moment looking at her in silence. Then one of them said, "Come, child, you are wanted." Will slowly got to her feet, feeling the strength returning to her legs. She stepped over the roots of the fallen oak tree and walked toward them. They made no move to help her. She reached them and stood before them. "Who are you?" she asked, "and what do you want with me?" One of the men looked at her, and then bent down and picked up a stone from the ground. He held it in front of her and asked, "What is this?" "A stone," said Will. "This is no stone," he said, "but bread. You are no child, but a demon come from the pit of hell." "I am no demon," cried Will. "I am the daughter of the king of Elfland. I was born in Elfland. My father is King Oberon. My mother is Titania. You must believe me. I have done no harm to any of you. Why do you wish to hurt me? Why do we wish to hurt you?" Said the man with the sharp voice. "Because you are an abomination, a creature of darkness. You have been seen creeping about the night. You have been seen talking to strange creatures of the air. You are a witch, a heretic, and we have come to take you to the stake. Do not believe him," she begged. "He lies. I have done no evil." "You lie," said the man. "We know all your wicked ways. We know how you call upon the powers of darkness, and how the dark things come to you from the night." "That was long ago," said Will. "I have been good since." "Good," he cried. "There is no good in you, only evil. You are the spawn of the devil, and you belong in hell. One of the men stepped forward and laid a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but he held her fast. "Come," he said, "you shall have your trial in the village. Then they shall know what manner of creature you are. Then the whole truth shall be out." He turned and beckoned to the others. "Take her to the village and keep a close watch on her." The man who had laid a hand on her led her along the road, 2 more following them. The 4th man limped along behind them, his face buried in his cloak. Will walked between 2 of them, the tall man with the sharp voice in front and the short man with the soft voice behind. Neither spoke until they were within sight of the village. Then the tall man turned to her and said, "We would ask you one thing. Are you the child who went into the bog on All Hallows Eve and has not come out again?" "Yes, I am that child," said Will. "And you would have me answer for that?" "Aye, we would have you answer for that." "Then let me tell you why I went into the bog. Perhaps you will find some reason to forgive me then." "Speak quickly, child," said the man, "for we have not much time." Will took a deep breath and began to speak. "I was driven into the bog by my own people. They chased me through the forest and drove me to the bog, and there they left me to die." "Your own people," said the tall man. "Who are they?" "My own people," said Will, "are those who dwell in Elfland. My father is King Oberon. My mother is Titonia. I am the Princess of Elfland." "Elfland," said the man. "There is no such place." "There is such a place," cried Will, "and you have outlawed my people, driven them from your world, killed many of them and made the rest flee into hiding. Only in the bogs and the forests can my people now live. And there I lived, hiding from you. But sometimes I grew weary of hiding. Sometimes I longed to walk in the sunlight and see the faces of men without fear. So I ventured out in the daytime and walked in the villages and towns, and you took me for a witch and a heretic and a daughter of the devil. And now you will kill me for a crime I have not committed. For I am no witch, no heretic. I am the Princess of Elfland, and I have done no evil to any of you." Well, everyone, that's the end of Chapter 9 of The Green Children. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of the story so far. I always love hearing your thoughts. And while you're at it, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn notifications on if you haven't already. It really helps support me and my work. Also, if you want to listen to The Green Children as an audiobook, you can check out the link in the description. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. The 2 adventurers were struggling to keep up with the young girl who was skipping ahead of them through the trees, her bright red hair bouncing with every step. "Are you sure this is the way, Elfrida?" Old Helm asked, pushing aside a low-hanging branch that threatened to smack him in the face. "I thought trolls lived in caves, not in forests," he added with a shiver. The forest round them was unnaturally silent, devoid of birdsong or the rustling of small animals. It felt like they were being watched. Elfrida, her bow held loosely in her hand, looked back at the 2 men. "Are you scared, Old Helm? You're acting like a rabbit about to be roasted over an open fire." "It's not the same when there are goblins about," Old Helm said defensively, recalling the small but fierce creatures they had encountered earlier in their travels. Goblins who hid in caves and ambushed travelers passing by. And these woods seemed very goblin-y. Elfrida just rolled her eyes and continued forward, deeper into the silent woods, until they came to a small clearing. In the center stood a large oak tree. Its branches gnarled and twisted like the limbs of some ancient creature. At the foot of the tree sat the girl cross-legged, her back against the rough bark. She hummed a tuneless song and seemed oblivious to the two adventurers creeping closer. "What is she doing?" Oldhelm whispered to Elfrida. She shrugged. "I have no idea. But I don't like it." As if sensing their approach, the girl suddenly stood up. She turned, revealing a pair of luminous green eyes that glinted in the dim light. Her skin was the color of emeralds, her hair a fiery red, and she wore a dress woven from leaves and twigs. "Who are you?" Elfrida asked, her voice echoing strangely in the clearing. The girl tilted her head and replied in a voice like rustling leaves. "Who are you? What brings you to the Green Children?" Elfrida hesitated, unsure how to respond. "We were sent to find you," Oldhelm blurted out, stepping forward. "Sent by who?" the girl asked, her gaze piercing. "By King Oberon," Oldhelm replied. "He wants you to come with us to the human lands." A flicker of amusement crossed the girl's face. "The king wants to see me. Why? He wants to make a treaty with your people," Oldhelm said, hoping he wasn't making a terrible mistake. The girl laughed. "It sounded like wind chimes in the forest." "A treaty? You humans are so predictable, always wanting what you can't have." She paused, her gaze distant. "Very well. I will go with you, but I warn you, you may not like what you find in my home." Before either of the adventurers could reply, the girl dashed away, weaving between the trees as if they were not there. Startled, Oldhelm and Elfrida quickly followed. As they ran, the trees grew thicker and the light dimmer until they were enveloped in a thick green mist. The air grew heavy, making it hard to breathe. Fear tightened its icy grip on Oldhelm's heart. This place felt wrong, tainted by some ancient evil. They burst out of the trees into a large cavern, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. The only light came from strange glowing fungi that sprouted from the cavern floor, casting eerie green shadows on the walls. The air hung heavy with moisture and the smell of decay. A low mist hung in the air, obscuring the cavern's depths. "Where are we?" Elfrida whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the vast space. "I don't know," Oldhelm replied, his voice barely a whisper. He felt like an insect crawling in the shadow of some monstrous beast. Then he saw it. In the flickering glow of the fungi, there nestled in the heart of the mist was a massive stone door carved with grotesque faces. Each visage seemed to leer at them with cruel amusement, their empty sockets staring into their souls. The Green Children froze, their eyes wide with awe and fear. They knew instinctively that behind the door lay something ancient and evil, something that should have remained buried in the past. "How do we open it?" Elfrida asked, her voice shaking slightly. The Green Children exchanged a worried glance. Neither of them had expected to find such a powerful magic here. "I don't know," Oldhelm admitted, his fingers tightening on his sword hilt. He could feel the oppressive weight of countless years pressing down on them, a tangible darkness that seemed to seep into his bones. As if an answer to his question, the ground rumbled, and from the shadows, a huge shape began to emerge. The colossal form lumbered closer, and they could make out the details of its grotesque features. Its skin was a sickly green, stretched taut over bulging muscles. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its mouth, filled with sharp fangs, was twisted into a perpetual snarl. "Run!" Elfrida screamed, and they didn't need to be told twice. Oldhelm and Elfrida raced deeper into the cavern, the creature's enraged bellows echoing behind them. They dodged over gnarled roots that jutted out of the ground like grasping claws and scrambled over rocks that shifted and crumbled beneath their feet. Suddenly, the cavern opened up into a large chamber, and in front of them stood another massive stone door, this one adorned with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist before their eyes. The green children stumbled to a stop, their breaths heavy in their chests, and stared at the door in horror. They were trapped. And then they heard the sound of heavy footsteps drawing closer. The creature had found them. Just as the green children braced for the end, a figure emerged from behind the tree line. She was tall and slender, her skin the color of polished ivory, her eyes like chips of emerald. Her dress flowed round her like water, and a crown of leaves and vines rested on her head. "Who are you?" Elfrida gasped, recognizing her from the prophecy told by the village elder. "This must be the Forest Queen, the protector of this realm." The Queen smiled sadly. "You seek the green children, why? We wish to take them back with us," Old Helm replied, hoping she would understand. "They belong with their own kind." The Queen shook her head. "No, they are safe here. You cannot take them." The Queen raised her hands, and vines erupted from the ground, wrapping round the adventurers, binding their limbs. "Let me go." Old Helm struggled, but the vines held him fast. "Why are you doing this?" "We only wanted to help." The Queen's eyes flashed with anger. "Help? By ripping the children from their home and forcing them into a world they do not belong." She turned, addressing the green children who had watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. "My children, you heard the Queen. These humans mean you no good. You must not go with them." But the girl stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I want to see the human lands. I want to see the world beyond this forest." The Queen's face softened with sadness, and she looked back at the adventurers. "Very well, but know this, if they are harmed in any way, I will hold you responsible." She waved her hand, and the vines holding the adventurers dissolved. "Thank you," Elfrida said, bowing her head. "We won't let you down." The Queen nodded and turned to address her children. "My children, it is time for you to leave. The humans will take care of you, but remember, you are the last of the green children. Should any harm come to you, our kind will die with you." The three figures stood in the center of the cavern, their silhouettes outlined against the eerie green glow. Old Helm knelt down and helped the girl to her feet. Her touch sent a jolt of energy through him, and he couldn't help but smile. "Are you ready, little one?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes shining with excitement and a hint of fear. Elfrida placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring. "Be careful," she said, her voice echoing in the vast cavern. They walked together toward the opening of the cave, leaving the green children behind. The Queen watched them go, her expression grave. She knew that the fate of her people rested on the shoulders of these two adventurers, and she prayed that they would not fail. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Old Helm and Elfrida made their way through the forest, the green children following close behind. The path was long and fraught with danger, but they pressed on, guided by the flickering light of the fungi and the faint hope of a brighter future. Hey there! Welcome back to another episode of Local Legends. Tonight's story comes from Northern Europe. The year is 1290 AD, and you are in a small village. For the past several decades, your village has existed in uneasy peace with the Huldra, a race of forest spirits who live in the woods surrounding your town. They look like beautiful human women except for their animalistic lower bodies and their general unfriendliness. But for the most part, they keep to themselves and your village can live in peace. That is until one day when they don't. As the sun sets on your village, a terrified young woman bursts out of the trees, breathlessly making her way towards the nearest house. She knocks frantically on the door until an elderly couple finally open it. The woman gasps, "Please, please hide me," before collapsing at their feet. The old man and woman exchange a confused glance, but bring the stranger inside and tend to her wounds. Eventually, she is able to explain what happened. She was out gathering herbs for the winter when she accidentally stumbled upon a strange cave. Hidden amongst the roots of some nearby trees, curiosity got the better of her, so she went inside. But once she stepped over the threshold, she was attacked by two horrible creatures with green faces, sharp teeth and claws, and emerald green skin. They dragged her deeper into the cave and threatened to unalive her if she didn't cooperate. But thankfully, she managed to escape. Now, she tells the couple she is certain the creatures will come looking for her again. So she begs them to protect her. And though confused by the entire situation, the couple agrees. That night, they hide the girl under a pile of hay in their barn. But shortly after midnight, they hear screams coming from outside. Then the creatures' voices. They can hear the beasts arguing about whether or not they should come inside the house and get the girl. They growl and screech at each other for a while, then eventually run off back into the forest. In the morning, the couple goes outside to find that the grass around their house is horribly trampled and there are signs of a struggle in the dirt. But most disturbing of all are the giant footprints that surround their house. They are big enough that the couple could fit 2 feet into each print. It looks like whatever these creatures are, they are massive. A few weeks pass and the girl is getting ready to leave the couple's home. When she steps outside, the sun hits her face and she gasps in pain. She stumbles and falls to the ground, writhing in agony. The couple rushes out of the house and helps her up. The girl cries out that her head feels like it's splitting into and asks for water. The couple brings her back inside and lays her down on their bed. Then the girl begins to tell them something, but suddenly stops, confused. She doesn't know what she was going to say. It's like her mind is blank. The girl explains that ever since she was brought out of the forest and exposed to the sun, her head has felt worse and worse every time she's been outside. And now she can't even remember why she came to this house in the first place. The couple pities the girl and takes care of her until she is well enough to leave the house again. They bring her outside to try and help her recover, but as soon as the sunlight hits her skin, she cries out and falls to the ground unconscious. The couple quickly rushes her back inside. They take care of her for months, all the while trying to get her to remember who she is and where she came from. But no matter what, she can't remember anything beyond the fact that she was raised in the forest and that her parents were killed. But she does remember that there was a girl she knew who lived in the village, but she doesn't remember her name. And then one day, the girl looks at the couple and says, "You're not my parents." Confused, the couple asks her how she knows that. And the girl replies, "I just know." She then reveals that she remembers flashes of her life in the forest. She remembers living deep underground with her family, eating strange plants and mushrooms, and her father warning her never to go above ground because the light would kill her. She also remembers her mother singing a haunting song that went, the green children, stay away from the green children." And she knows that the Holdra aren't just forest spirits, but are in fact her people. You see, long ago, the Holdra were an ancient tribe of people who lived deep within the forest. They were pagan and worshipped nature. And when Christianity began to spread across northern Europe, the villagers nearby grew afraid of the tribe and began to attack them. So the Holdra fled deep into the woods and built great caverns beneath the roots of old trees. There they lived for centuries, subsisting on the plants and animals they could find in the caves. The only time they were able to go above ground was during the night. And to avoid being captured by humans, they used powerful magic to transform themselves into hideous creatures to scare off any trespassers. However, it seemed that the girl had ventured too close to the surface on one fateful day and had been spotted by the creatures who lived in the forest. Her family sent her away to hide in the village in hopes that she would be safe there, but instead, she was found by those same creatures who took her back to their lair and imprisoned her. The girl explains that every time she is exposed to sunlight, it weakens her connection to her Huldra side and strengthens her human side. This gives her memories of her former life and makes her feel more pain. In a few months, she will likely be fully human again. She thanks the couple for taking care of her and bids them goodbye. As the sun sets, she walks out of the house and disappears into the forest. In the morning, the couple goes to check on her, but her hut is gone. And though they search for her, they never see her again. Some believe she was taken back by the Huldra, while others think she simply disappeared from this world entirely. It wasn't until decades later that another girl appeared at the doorstep of a nearby village. She was dirty and scared and told the villagers that she was being hunted by creatures from the forest. However, the villagers didn't believe her story and drove her out of town, after which she vanished into the woods every now and then. A girl matching her description is spotted in the forest, but every time someone tries to approach her, she runs away. Some believe that she is trying to warn us that the Huldra are returning. Others think she is simply mad, but the truth is, no one knows. So I gotta ask you guys, what do you think happened to the girl? Do you think she was taken back by the Huldra, or is she simply lost to this world forever? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Local Legends, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could hit the like button. And if you want to hear more stories like these, consider subscribing to my channel. In the heart of a timeless wood where ancient trees sang secrets to the wind, there lived a hermit. A woman dot in her weathered hands and kind eyes lay the wisdom of ages. For she was not just any hermit. She was the keeper of dreams, the weaver of fates, the green children Elfrida. Deep in the woods, nestled amidst roots as thick as a giant's limbs, was her cottage. It looked like an upturned boat, its roof a tangle of leaves and vines that hid its magic from prying eyes. Inside, fires crackled merrily, chasing away the chill, but it was always cold enough for a blanket of frost to cling to the windows. Outside, the forest sighed with slumbering life, breathing dreams into the world. And it was here that Elfrida wove those dreams into tapestries of moonlight and shadow. One day, a young girl stumbled out of the woods, lost and alone, her clothes torn, her hair a tangled mess. Elfrida took her in, sensing a tale of sadness woven into the very fabric of the child's being. The girl's name was Rowan, and she told Elfrida of a faraway land called the Hollow Land, a place where shadows stretched long and memories whispered on the wind. But she couldn't recall how she got to this part of the woods. All she remembered was a deep, unending darkness that seemed to swallow everything, even home story. Elfrida, with the wisdom that only the ancient trees could share, saw that Rowan's memories were locked away, hidden by a spell as old as the woods themselves. But why, and who cast that spell? These questions echoed in the silence of the night as Rowan slept under the weaver's watchful gaze. As days turned into weeks, Rowan thrived under the green children's care. The woods became her playground, and its creatures her companions. Yet the whispers of the past still tugged at her heart. One evening, as twilight painted the sky with hues of purple and orange, Rowan approached Elfrida, her eyes filled with a longing that mirrored the setting sun. "Elfrida," she began, her voice as clear as a mountain stream. "I feel a pull in my heart, a longing for a home I can't remember. I want to go back." She paused, her gaze dropping to the ground. "But I'm afraid. What if I don't find my way back here? What if I get lost in the darkness again?" Elfrida, her face etched with understanding, placed a comforting hand on Rowan's shoulder. "You needn't worry, child. You are safe here. This wood will protect you." She looked into the girl's eyes, seeing the unyielding spirit that burned brightly despite the shadows that threatened to engulf it. "But if your heart truly calls to you, then you must follow it. The choice, Rowan, is yours. Stay here with me and forget the Hollow Land, or go back and face whatever darkness awaits you." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the rustling of leaves. Rowan wrestled with her thoughts, her heart torn between the life she'd known and the home she couldn't remember. On one side, the present, filled with the warmth of the green children's love, the comfort of the wood's embrace, and the joy of a life well lived. On the other, the unknown, the whispering shadows of the Hollow Land, and the desperate hope of finding answers in the darkness. She thought of the endless games with the wood sprites, their laughter echoing through ancient trees. She thought of cozy nights by the fire, listening to Elfrida's tales of brave heroes and magical lands. She thought of the soft moss beneath her feet and the sweet berries that stained her lips and fingers. Her life in the woods had been a tapestry woven with joy, friendship and laughter. It was a life of sunshine and starlight, of blooming flowers and babbling brooks. But then there were the dreams, vivid and haunting, pulling her towards a distant shore. Dreams of a sprawling castle with towers that scraped the clouds, of cobblestone streets echoing with the clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages, of a mother's gentle touch and a father's booming laugh. These dreams were fragments of a forgotten life, pieces of a puzzle that fit together to form a picture of a home she ached to remember. As the minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity, Rowan felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a physical burden. Finally, when the last rays of sunlight surrendered to the night, she made her choice. "Thank you, Elfrida," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I choose to stay." Relief washed over Elfrida's features, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "You have made the right choice, Rowan. This wood is your home now." But as Rowan turned to leave, a sudden pang of regret shot through her. She had chosen to stay, yet a part of her would forever remain in the Hollow Land. She hesitated, her hand reaching out to touch the rough bark of an ancient oak. "Elfrida," she said, turning back, "before I forget completely, may I take something with me? Something that reminds me of the Hollow Land." Elfrida, her gaze sharp with understanding, nodded silently. She led Rowan to the edge of the wood where a silver stream babbled merrily over smooth stones. Tucked away in a hollow beneath an arching willow branch was a small patch of earth. The soil here, rich and dark, held the essence of the land itself. "Take a handful of this soil, Rowan," Elfrida said softly, and planted it beneath the dreaming tree. "Let it be a reminder of the roots that bind you to the Hollow Land." Tears glistened in Rowan's eyes as she knelt beside the stream, scooped up the cool, moist earth and pressed it against her chest. It felt like holding a piece of her soul in her hands. She rose, her resolve firming with each step as she walked toward the dreaming tree, its branches heavy with the promise of dreams. With reverence, she dug a small hole at the tree's base and carefully placed the earth inside. As the last particle nestled into its new home, a sprout emerged, a tiny green shoot reaching for the sky. Rowan watched, mesmerized, as the sprout grew, twisting and turning until it resembled a miniature version of the dreaming tree itself. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the sprout vanished, leaving behind only a smooth, polished stone. The stone hummed faintly, vibrating with a power that resonated deep within Rowan's bones. It was a token of her homeland, a tangible link to the memories she had left behind. Holding the stone close, Rowan knew she had made the right choice. She would stay in the woods, embracing the life Elfrida had offered her, but she would never forget the Hollow Land. She traced the intricate patterns on the stone surface, committing them to memories that should she ever forget, the stone would serve as a reminder. And so Rowan's tale weaves on, a tapestry of bravery and belonging. She lived a full and joyful life in the woods, sharing its wonders with all who entered its embrace. Yet every now and then, when the wind sighed through the ancient trees or the moon bathed the forest floor in silvery light, she would feel the pull of her forgotten home. And on those nights, she would sit beneath the dreaming tree, the stone from the Hollow Land warming in her hands, and she would dream. The next chapter, the new spring. Years passed, seasons turned, and the little girl who had come out of the twilight grew into a young woman. Her hair, once the color of dandelion fluff, was now as dark as the leaves of the ancient oak under which she had first awakened. Her skin, once soft and white as milk, now bore the golden glow of honey. Her eyes, pools of twilight, remained unchanged, still holding the secrets of the fading light. She no longer needed the sheltering embrace of the old willow tree. Now she walked among the mortals in the human village at the edge of the whispering woods. She became known as the healer of the green children, a title given to her not just because of the emerald glow that sometimes surrounded her hands when she soothed an aching joint or mended a broken bone, but also because she wove stories into healing tales of the twilight world that made the mundane feel magical and the impossible possible. She spoke of fireflies that danced among the stars and mushrooms that glowed like moons. She told of trees laden with luminous fruit and rivers that flowed upwards to the sky. And always she wove in the legend of the green children, of how the children from the fading light had stepped through a shimmering portal into this world and changed it forever. Yet, though she lived among the people, she never forgot where her true home lay. Every full moon, when the veil between worlds was thinnest, she would return to the whispering woods. There she would sit at the foot of the great oak and let its gnarled roots wrap round her like the arms of an ancient crone. From its hollows, it shared with her the memories of ages past, the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, the songs of long-dead bards, and the wisdom of forgotten roots. One day, while sitting at the foot of the oak, the young woman noticed a tiny shoot pushing its way up through the dry leaves at its roots. At first, it was no bigger than a finger, but day by day, it grew stronger and reached higher. The young woman watched with fascination as it slowly unfurled into a leaf, then another, and another until there were 7 leaves, each one shaped like a teardrop and edged with silver. And then, to her astonishment, the shoot burst into bloom. From the center of the tree, 7 blossoms unfolded, each as big as her head and filled with a pollen that sparkled like moonlight. She looked up and saw that every leaf on the tree was now ablaze with these bioluminescent flowers, turning the ancient oak into a beacon of moonlight. Then, as suddenly as they had bloomed, the flowers began to fade, their light growing dimmer and dimmer until the tree was plunged into darkness once more. Over the next few days, the young woman returned to the tree every night, but the flowers did not bloom again. She sat at the foot of the oak, talking to the tree, asking why it had shown her this wonder only to take it away. Then, one night, as she sat wrapped in the comforting shadows of the tree's roots, the oak whispered to her, "You have walked among the humans for many years now, weaving our magic into their lives and bringing their joys and sorrows into our own. You are a child of both worlds, and it is time that you brought them together. The young woman looked up at the dark branches, puzzled. What did the ancient tree mean? What could she, a simple healer who told stories, do to bring to such different worlds together? That night, as the moon climbed high in the sky, she returned to the village. She went to the oldest person in the village elder, whose hut was filled with herbs and trinkets from far-off lands. He listened patiently as she told him what the ancient oak had said. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "It is time for the Twilight Festival," he said. "We have forgotten about it for so long. For many years before the Green Children came to this world, the villagers had celebrated the Twilight Festival. That was the time of year when the veil between the mortal world and the Twilight world was at its thinnest, and the people believed that the spirits of their ancestors could walk more easily between the worlds. They would leave out offerings of food and drink for their ancestors, and in return, they would receive blessings for the coming year. But over the years, as life in the village became more difficult, the festival had been forgotten. The young woman knew that she had to remind the villagers of the festival. But how could she make them believe in the magic of the Twilight world without showing them something miraculous? She thought of the ancient oak and its moon flowers and had an idea. She gathered the villagers together and invited them to come to the village square at dusk to witness a miracle. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky was filled with the colors of twilight, she led them to the edge of the forest and asked the ancient oak to help her. The young woman stood at the edge of the clearing and closed her eyes. She imagined the countless fireflies that she had seen dancing in the twilight and willed them to appear. As if by magic, they began to rise from the ground all round her, filling the clearing with their twinkling lights. The villagers gasped in amazement as thousands of fireflies rose into the air, forming swirling patterns of light. Then the young woman turned to the oak and asked for a flower. Reaching out, she touched the gnarled bark and felt a blossom unfold at her fingertips. She plucked the flower from the tree and held it out to the villagers. It glowed with a soft, beautiful light that seemed to fill the clearing with hope and wonder. As the fireflies continued their silent dance above them, the young woman told the villagers stories of the Twilight world, stories that she had heard from the Green Children, stories that had become a part of her own. She told them of a world where mushrooms glowed like lanterns and rivers ran upwards to the sky. She spoke of the Green Children and how they had brought light and hope into the world. Then she took the glowing flower from its stem and scattered its pollen into the wind. "This is the pollen of the everbloom," she said. "Plant it in your gardens and watch as it glows throughout the longest night." And so they did. Each villager took some of the pollen and planted it in their gardens. And that night, when the moon was at its fullest, their gardens glowed with an otherworldly light. From that day on, the Twilight Festival became a celebration of both worlds, the world of twilight and the world of mortals. The Green Children had brought these two worlds together, and now the villagers honored them each, year with a festival of light and hope. And so the tale of the Green Children continued, passed down from generation to generation. The memory of the two children from the twilight kept alive by the villagers who celebrated the beauty of the fading light by planting moonflowers in their gardens, by telling stories of fireflies that danced among the stars, and by remembering the legend of the Green Children. But if you enjoyed the story, please like it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to be notified of new releases. Also check out the playlist for other fantasy shorts. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, welcome to the next chapter in our serialized podcast novella. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our new episodes. And if you enjoy what we do, please consider supporting us through donations. We won't be making any Patreon-exclusive content this year for the holidays, but you can still support us and get access to our bonus podcast, which we are now releasing monthly. But without further ado, let's get into it. Chapter 23, The Echo. A few weeks had passed since Will and his companions left the safety of Woolpit and ventured out into the wilds to seek their fortunes. The party had been traveling light, leaving most of their excess gear with a pack animal and storing it in the root cellar of the kindly farmer who offered them refuge. Their plan was to stay on the road until they were close enough to Littlebridge that they could hear the sound of running water over the din of the green. Then they would know they were close enough to the river to make camp for the night. Thus far, their stealth and silence had been working wonders. They hadn't been spotted by any deer, and the wolves seemed to have picked up their scent and moved away before the travelers even made camp. But tonight, as they ate their meager rations round a small fire, the wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of man and beast. Will held up his hand, silencing the chatter and closing his eyes. He listened intently. A low rumble echoed through the trees and slowly grew louder. It sounded like distant thunder, but there were no clouds in the sky. Before anyone could speak, the ground trembled again, and this time the tremors lasted longer and grew stronger. Will felt the earth shake beneath him and his heart sink. "Run!" he shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Hide in the trees." The others didn't need to be told twice and disappeared into the shadows as quickly as they could. Will ran after them, praying that whatever was out there hadn't caught their scent yet. When he finally reached the tree line, out of breath, he turned to see a massive shape emerge from the trees behind them. It looked like a bear, but its limbs were all wrong, too long and spindly. And where its head should have been, there was only a gaping maw filled with rows upon rows of sharp teeth. Its fur, if it could be called that, was matted and greasy, hanging off its skeletal frame in strips. As it lumbered closer, Will saw that its ribs showed through its back, and its belly sagged like a deflated windskin. The creature shambled past him and the others, sniffing at the ground and making a low keening sound. Will watched in horror as it stumbled over roots and rocks, seemingly oblivious to its own pain. It collapsed at the base of a tree not far from where they were hiding and shuddered violently, as if an unseen hand had reached in and squeezed its heart. Then, just as suddenly, it was still. One of the braver members of the party crept forward and peered over the creature's shoulder. "It's dead," he called back to the others. "Whatever it is, it's dead." Relieved but shaken, the party made camp a few miles farther down the road and tried to forget the horrors that lurked just outside their camp. In the morning, when the others weren't looking, Will slipped away from the group and returned to the creature's body. As he approached, the gruesome sight of the previous night was replaced by something almost mundane. There on the forest floor lay the corpse of a wolf, emaciated and broken, its ribs showing through its matted fur. It was missing an eye, and its ear was torn and tattered, as if caught in a hunter's snare. But there was no trap to be seen. And the more Will examined the carcass, the more convinced he became that it had been mauled by another wolf, perhaps one driven mad by hunger. Will marked the spot where he found the wolf's body with a cairn of stones and hurried back to rejoin the others. Whatever dangers lay in wait in the wilds, Will knew that their supplies were low and they would have to press on soon. And while the creature that had attacked them might have been nothing more than a deranged wolf, it was a sign that they couldn't stay in the forest much longer. Their best chance of survival now lay in reaching Littlebridge as quickly as possible, and hoping that the river had risen enough to wash away the taint of the green. But as the days passed and the river remained stubbornly at the same level, Will's hope began to dwindle. Would they ever escape the curse of the green? Or were they doomed to wander the tainted wilds forever? Meanwhile, deep in the tangled wilds, a lone figure emerged from the trees. Her name was Elfrida, and she was the last of her kind. For weeks, she'd been tracking the travelers, watching them from afar and listening to their every move. She knew that they were close to Littlebridge, and soon she would have them in her sights. As she walked, her hand rested on the hilt of the dagger at her hip, its emerald green handle a stark contrast against her dark leather jerkin. She hadn't meant to kill any of the travelers. At first, she had only wanted to scare them off. But when Will had turned and fought back against her, she had realized that her mission had changed. Now she wanted to punish him for what he had done to her people. For weeks, she had stalked him and his companions, learning their habits and planning their demise. She knew that they slept late and woke early, and she knew that they traveled during the day and made camp in the evening. She also knew that they were tired and hungry, and that they would be willing to risk anything for a warm meal and a full belly. So as the sun set and the travelers made camp, Elfrida struck. She waited until the shadows were long and the fire was low. Then she pounced. She moved like a phantom through the trees, silent and deadly, and before the travelers knew what was happening, they were surrounded. "Don't move," she hissed, her voice like ice. "Don't try anything funny or you'll be sorry." The travelers froze, their eyes wide with fear. Will slowly raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "What do you want?" he asked cautiously. Elfrida stepped forward, her dagger glinting in the firelight. "I want revenge," she said softly. "Revenge from my people, from my home." With that, she lunged. Elfrida danced among the travelers, her dagger flashing, and soon one of them lay wounded at her feet. Will and the others fought back, but they were no match for Elfrida's skill. One by one, they fell, and soon it was just Will and Elfrida left standing in the clearing. "Why?" Will gasped, clutching a deep wound on his chest. "Why are you doing this?" Elfrida panted, her chest heaving. "Because you took everything from me," she whispered, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You took my home, my family, my life. And now I'm going to take yours." With that, she lunged. But as she closed in on Will, she saw something that made her hesitate. In Will's hand, clutched tight, was a small leather-bound journal. It was Elfrida's journal, the one she had lost when she fled the Green. She dropped her dagger and rushed forward, snatching the journal from Will's grasp. "How?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "How did this get here?" Will smiled weakly. "I found it on the road," he said. "I thought you might want it back." Elfrida opened the journal and began to read. The pages were filled with her thoughts and feelings, her fears and hopes, and her memories of the life she had once lived. As she read, she felt a sense of peace come over her. Maybe there was still good in her, she thought. Maybe she could still be saved. Suddenly, her eyes widened. She turned the page and gasped. The last entry read, "The green veil never truly lifts." And with that, Elfrida collapsed. And that is the end of The Green Children. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey, and thank you to our supporters for making it possible. We will see you in the next story.